Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. We're always delighted that you join us for part of your Sunday morning for conversations about how we can improve the lives of each other and all the members of our community as people of faith here in the greater Joplin area. My guest this morning is going to be John Clayton, who's the Executive Director of Hearts and Hammers, which is a local group that helps us to watch out for our elderly and to help take care of some of their needs. And so that is one of those things that I hope that we are doing as a caring community, that we are looking out for all the folks around us, whatever their needs might happen to be. And sometimes there are groups then that can come together to help to meet some of those needs when we know that they're there. And Hearts and Hammers is one of those groups. So we're going to be back after this Mercy Minute to talk with John Clayton, who's the Executive Director at Hearts and Hammers, about how we might continue to care for our elderly. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and we'll be right back after this Mercy Minute.
The dreaded tagged photo. I married the love of my life in October, and when I got home that night, I saw this. Frankly, this is every obese person's worst nightmare. You have no control, none, over what other people post. And up until that day, I'd been very careful about how I presented myself on social media. In fact, I generally only posted photos like this. What's sad is that I haven't always been like this. Confession, I've been a yo-yo dieter for roughly 10 years. When I met this amazing guy 3 years ago, he didn't care how much I weighed, but he did care about my health. A month after our wedding, I talked to my doctor and my journey began. Here's an honest and usually pretty entertaining look at how I got to bariatric surgery and beyond. Buckle up, check out my blog, Confessions of a Yo-Yo Dieter.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning is John Clayton, Executive Director of Hearts and Hammers. So, John, it's good to have you on the show.
It's good to be here.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and maybe your family, and then let's find out what Hearts and Hammers does.
All right, be glad to. We came to Joplin in 1956. My dad was a manager of Meat Lumber Company, and that's kind of where I started my career.
Okay.
And working in building material supply. I just retired this past January and making a full-time job out of Hearts and Hammers.
Well, there you go. So what is Hearts and Hammers? What do they do?
Briefly, we do home modification work for people that can't afford to pay. Elderly is our primary clientele, although we do work for single moms, single dads, just people that can't quite make the income level to afford to pay for labor. A perfect storm for us is to have a job where they provide material and we provide donated labor. We have a network of volunteer labor base that is skilled labor that can do these kind of things.
Which is great because sometimes, I've got people who are willing to do things but don't have quite the same technical skill. So my dad was a builder, but that's not what I learned how to do when I was growing up. So sometimes we wind up with those particular situations. So how did you all get started and go in this kind of a vein of doing these things?
We started in 2003, and just as a one-day-a-year work day, partnering with a lot of churches to gather as many as 300 people one day a year, generally in the fall, to do mostly yard cleanups, paint jobs, and siding repair, yard work, raking leaves, just basically exterior-oriented remodel jobs.
Right. So I think I remember some of those, days, but I didn't know you'd evolved into something else that, is now going around year-round. Because obviously, the people who sometimes need this kind of help don't just need it one time a year. Right. The needs are all year-round. Yeah.
It always broke my heart when after the workday somebody would call and have some type of need that we could meet, and we wouldn't do that just simply because we all worked at full-time jobs and couldn't get on something after the workday.
Right.
So starting about 3 years ago, we started doing jobs not necessarily on the workday, but as we could just gather the people together to do the work.
Yeah. So like, for example, like say at St. Peter's, I might be able to if we had a parishioner who needed something or something, I might be able to do the find the materials and things like that, but I wouldn't necessarily always have the skilled labor in order to get it done.
Sure.
And that's where you guys would come in and be able to provide some of that.
Yeah, the networking, it would be great through churches, and we have some of that now, but we'd like to see that grow.
Well, and again, I think, the sad part is, I'll give you a little push here, but I'm just saying the sad part is the pastors probably aren't watching too much TV this morning, is my guess. But for those of you out there who are watching, are going to be a church leader, you might want to mention this to your pastor, that Hearts and Hammers is looking for some partnerships to be able to do some of those things.
Right.
So where did you come up with your volunteer base, John? How'd you wind up with this catalog of people who know what they're doing?
That's a good question. Well, in spending almost 40 years in the building material supply business, I served on the Home Builders Association Board of Directors for 9 years. Made a lot of connections in the building community.
Sure. From
those resources. When you're in a business for 40 years, it's more than just a job.
Yeah.
You develop friendships and relationships, and the Hearts and Hammers thing just started going and just growing, and we did over 109 jobs last year.
That's amazing.
The year before that was 40, and the year before that was 17. So you can see just how it's grown.
Right.
Of being able to put it full-time work.
So you mentioned, upon retiring, that's where this thing really started to take off on you.
Right.
How are you enjoying that retirement?
I'm loving it.
Oh, good.
Having the time of my life, really.
That's great. I love it. So these would be people. So, like, for example, say there's somebody out listening to this now and says, I've got some of those skills and I could help with some of that. How would they get in touch with you so that they could join your list?
Be glad to take a phone call from them, but a little bit more reliable if they have computer access would be to send us an email. Okay. And I always respond to that. Okay. I'm always on that, a telephone call. But the website, Hearts and Hammers, Joplin.
HeartsandHammersJoplin.org.
Right.
All one word, Hearts and Hammers spelled out. Okay,
right.
So Hearts and Hammers.
Yeah.
2 M's in Hammers for anybody that's wondering. Okay.
And A-N-D. That's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah. Joplin.org. Okay.
Right.
And that's the easiest way to get in touch with you all.
And most reliable.
And most reliable.
Right.
So that would be for folks who are willing to volunteer. Would the people who might be needing your services be able to get in touch the same way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
A lot of times if I take a phone call, if I'm on a job site, it's a little bit clumsy. I just can't get to paper to write their name down. I've written them down on lumber before, but that's not too terribly reliable. So the best thing to do is send us an email.
I always got a big kick out of my dad. You're reminding me of my dad right now, because Dad would always be scrambling for that pencil, and then writing it on the side of a 2x4 when they were framing a wall, and then he had to go figuring out which stud that he put it on when he was walking along to do it.
Well, that's how a lot of tablets, a lot of shopping lists are made when you're going to the lumberyard.
I love it, love it, love it, love it. Good memories for me. So in terms of that, you've got this catalog of folks, and you say you do mostly interior stuff.
Exterior.
Exterior stuff.
Right.
And you specialize in that for what reason?
As time goes on, there are different access needs. Just call out for somebody that has, let's say, something as drastic as an amputation, and in a wheelchair, probably temporarily, maybe somebody that has a stroke. We're working on a job today where this gentleman's had a stroke. He's probably going to be in a wheelchair for a long term. Sure. So he can't get into his house without us building a wheelchair ramp so that they can get him home. So there's some time pressure in that, but it's a good thing to do. Our volunteer labor base costs half the cost of a job.
Well, and the other thing about that is that you guys have now built enough wheelchair ramps that you guys know what you're doing.
Kind of got it down pat. Built 17 last year.
Yeah. Which is which is wonderful, because in that context, again, if you don't have the knowledge base, it makes it harder to help somebody.
Right. Yeah. I am not personally a skilled carpenter, but I know a few.
Yeah.
So those guys, it's amazing what they can do when they just get the, how your dad probably was. He just gets the picture, just gets the vision of it, and just makes it happen.
Yeah. I was always amazed, and little things that I found out. That they were, that he just suddenly, he'd see it in his head, okay, that's got to match that, and so I'm going to make it match that. And people look up later and go, wow, that's really, how'd that happen? I said, that was just my dad's eye.
Yeah, that's exactly
He did pass on some of his eye to me, but the how to do it, and that didn't get passed on.
I'm probably there too.
That didn't get passed on, yeah. So, in terms of taking care of those things, and you've upped your number of jobs, in terms of do that. So, where do you get your like say funding and things like that? I mean, you know, it's just because I mean, you know, sometimes you got a great organization, but you got to keep it going. And how do you do some of that?
We're privately funded. We're really not connected to any government funding at all.
Okay.
So churches would be a good resource. We have 3 that support us on a regular basis right now, but we could sure do a lot more. And for that relationship, we provide a service. If they get a call from somebody that has a need of some kind, being that connection, they just know who to call and the procedure to review the job. We always work for homeowners. We very rarely work on rental property. Occasionally we'll build a wheelchair ramp if they provide the material if it's on a rental property, but you have to have a written permission from the landlord.
Sure. Well, and again, you get into those kinds of things, and you know, people don't often think about all the details that are necessary, but you know, you guys have to think about it in terms of those things. Yeah. So, wheelchair ramps. What are some of the other kinds of work you've done for people in the last year?
Again, mostly exterior oriented, but we've got a relationship with a HVAC company here. If somebody has a furnace out, they'll go do a service call and not charge us for the service call, just charge us for parts. So it's a Christian-based company that is very faithful to Hearts and Hammers, very loyal, and has done a great job in the middle of the winter time getting somebody up and heated, their heat back on.
Yeah. Now, do you have anybody that works for the organization that does like any kind of a social service intake or anything like that to make sure that you know who you're helping is truly in need, or do you have any? I mean, does anybody worry about that in your organization? Or?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I answer to a board of directors, and most of those are construction-oriented people. But we have a application that the people would fill out. A lot of times I'll help them fill it out. That has name, address. We look up on a search engine called Beacon to make sure that they are a property owner. We screen their income, making sure that, but a lot of times you can just simply tell.
Sure, yeah.
But they have to be under income, just income guidelines and home ownership guidelines.
Okay, so you guys do follow those things, and you work with those kinds of things as a charitable organization.
Right.
Now, are you a 501c3 corporation? So
Yeah,
really, if anybody wanted even to make donations to your organization, those would be tax deductible if they wanted to make them to Hearts and Hammers. So maybe you don't have the skills or anything like that, but maybe you've got a little, you want to help somebody else out, or see that somebody else that might wind up at Hearts and Hammers might be able to do that, so you could also help in that way.
That's well said.
Donations, yeah.
The ingredients of what we do are very simple. Volunteer labor-based, material cost, and overhead costs. We just have to meet a certain amount of expenses, which we have a budget for. But we have a lot of good partnerships and material resources too. Independent Living is one of our partners that will provide material on a job, and then we provide the labor to accomplish the job.
Cool. Well, my guest this morning is John Clayton, who's the Executive Director for Hearts and Hammers, and we're talking a little bit here about how to help basically some of our elderly or some of our low-income folks in the area with some exterior home repairs. We're going to be right back after a quick break, but stick around, and we'll be right back to talk again a little bit more with John Clayton of Hearts and Hammers. So don't go away. We'll be right back after a quick break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, John, one of the things that we were talking about right before the break was the simplicity in some ways of what this organization does. And I'm going to tell you that this is one of those things that I've always admired. I've been in Joplin now for almost 13 years myself, okay? And one of the things that I admire about a group like this and about a vision like this and the ability to carry it out is that it is simple and it's so practical. It seemed like a Joplin, Joplin made in terms of the way that everybody goes about it. And I love that, frankly, because we are a very pragmatic community where you're just like, well, if we see a job and we see a need and we feel it's justified, we just go out and kind of go for it and get it done, which is why I love this. So, you know, you teasingly said on the break, you said, well, we've about covered what we do, and I understand that. But give me some stories, because I think that's one of the things that sometimes our viewers really love to hear.
Sure.
Are stories about, you know, so you've been doing this job for several years, but now doing it full time this year.
Right.
Okay. So give me 2 or 3 of your favorite stories about when you walked away from that job that you and everybody else who'd been working on it just felt like, this is the reason why we started this, this is the reason why we do this, and that's why I want to come back tomorrow and do it some more.
Sure. Well, I really feel called by God to do this.
Good.
There's times when I don't have a clue how something's going to get done, and God just puts it in place. I had a covered porch one time for this little girl had I guess you would call it an illness where she can't be out in sunlight. So the covered porch wasn't necessarily something that was a add-on to their house just for the fun of it.
Right.
It was a necessary thing for her, and this thing was rotten, and it was huge. And I'm looking at that thinking it was even dangerous to do the demo. I didn't want volunteers to get hurt. So I told her, I said, I don't know if you pray or not, but I said, if you don't, it's a good time to start. I said, I'm going to be praying about this job, and I'm convinced that God wants to get this done.
Yeah.
So that afternoon, I think the Holy Spirit just said, call this church that's not far from our house, and I did. And the preacher didn't hesitate. He said, yeah, I'll go look there right at lunchtime. So he goes over there, looks at it, calls me back that afternoon and says, yeah. He said, I'm going to bring this to our board, but he said, I think we can do this job with our people, and I think we can cover the cost of material. So that's a perfect thing for me. I won't even have to get a tool belt on.
Yeah.
Then sure enough, they did. And they ministered to that family. And it brought 2 churches together that had been a split. That was really the neatest thing, I think.
Oh, that I mean, you know, when you can get churches to be working together, I mean, that's kind of miraculous.
Right.
Isn't it? There you go.
Unity is a good thing.
Unity is a good thing. And sometimes we don't even aim for it as often as we probably should.
Right.
But that's a great story. How about some of the people that maybe you've helped in terms of what a difference it made in their lives? Well,
home maintenance is a burden, especially for a widow. There was a lady named Goldie that I kind of arrived at her house accidentally. I was there, I was supposed to be across the street and 2 doors down, but I rang the wrong doorbell.
Oh, there you
and
go.
She noticed something that we do that was lettering on my truck, and I said, well, I'll come back and figure that for you. It was guttering. And not only did we just shifted gears from what I did for a living into making it a Hearts and Hammers job. And sure enough, we did her guttering, we painted her fascia, we fixed her roof, we put on some handrails. We just hooked Goldie up.
Yeah.
So it was a cool thing. And Goldie didn't call. She didn't call asking for help.
Yeah.
I was just there at her door.
Yeah. And, you know, and you gotta, I mean, you know, again, if you're a person of faith, you know, some people look at that and say, oh, that's all coincidence. But when you're a person of faith, you look at that and go, that was a God thing. Yeah. You know, that you went to the wrong door and just rang the doorbell.
It was exactly
and,
a God
you know,
thing.
struck up that conversation to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing. So you've got stories like that of the way that unfolds for you all the time.
Dozens of them.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, in terms of some of that, what do you think? I mean, if you could dream about where Hearts and Hammers would be, you know, say 2 years from now, what would you dream about? So dream out loud for us a little bit here on the air. So maybe somebody's listening to this dream. Maybe this is a God thing too.
Could be. You never know. He's always up to something. I would love to manage jobs. I'm going to be getting to the age to where the manual labor thing is probably not going to be something my body lets me do. So what I would like to do is manage jobs and have several jobs going on at the same time. Like I said, we did 109 jobs last year. We've got a goal of 120 jobs this year. To do 10 jobs a month with a small volunteer labor base and me is demanding.
Sure.
So if I could have enough of those volunteer labor base and enough lead people to where I could have multiple jobs going on at the same time, all we're about is bringing God's blessing to people. So if we could bring more blessings, how can that be a bad thing?
Well, I agree with you. Now, you're not attached to any particular church, although you said you did have several churches that volunteer or kind of in partnership with you to do some of those things.
Yeah, we're not really connected to one single church, several.
Yeah, several. Okay. And so in terms of that, you know, anybody from any denomination, you know?
Right.
I bet you'd even take somebody who didn't believe at all, if they really just wanted to be a service in the community.
Oh, I'd love that.
If they got a heart or a hammer, not too
Yep.
bad in terms of some of those things. Well, so the volunteers, certainly in terms of donations, certainly in terms of skilled laborers, all those things are going to help. And again, you can find John. He says the most reliable is to reach him at Hearts and Hammers, okay, all spelled out, Hearts and Hammers, Joplin.org. Where you can get in touch with him and either volunteer, make those requests, see whether or not you might be able to utilize some of those services, those kinds of things. If a church, dreaming with me a little bit about the churches here. So I see where you would like to, kind of grow the organization. So you're really looking, in some ways, for a few more supervisor kind of people who knew what they were doing in the construction business and could do some of that. Do you have any, let me ask this question before I guess kind of get into that, my next part, but do you also have some need for, like, say, some non-skilled laborers? I mean, to just kind of like, maybe they don't have any carpentry skills, but they like to work outside and they like to learn from other people and they like to do those things. Do you have jobs for them too?
Sure do. We've got three yard cleanup jobs to do right now on our schedule. And we always have the fall work day. Now, we'll work in partnership with Habitat for Humanity, A Brush with Kindness, and Hearts and Hammers works together for the annual work day that I think is September 28th this year.
Okay.
Volunteers turning out for that. It's generally always in McClellan Park. We'll meet at 8 o'clock and disperse to different jobs that we've screened, organized to where we don't want to take a paintbrush to a rake job. So we'll coordinate it, make sure that they know what the scope of the work is, and set them on the task of getting it done.
So that'll be coming up in September.
Right.
Okay. And you get that word out to the community. I wish if I'd have known that a little earlier, I'd have probably tried to make you land somewhere around September 28th. But how else do you get that word out to the community?
We
just through the local churches?
Yeah, through the local church. Well, there's several churches that have worked for us in the past. St. Paul's been real good in Carl Junction and Joplin. They get a large nucleus of people to turn out for the work day, and a lot of other churches. We just have a whole list of people. We use something called a house captain. He would be a lead person on that job. We'll contact that house captain. He will man the job with people that he knows that can get the job done and complete the task.
Yeah. Now, where my other question was going was, if, say, there's a church out there that just doesn't even know where they'd start or what they do, can you go in? I mean, have you gone in and talked to, like, church boards or people about those kinds of things so that they could dream a little bit better about how they might be able to be of assistance?
There's always seems to be people within a congregation that have the heart to do this kind of work. So really it all needs is just organization. If we can take that nucleus of people and develop a staff, that's exactly what I'm talking about, where we'd like to grow into. It seems to me that there's the people that have the heart for the work. All we need is a job and a little bit of organization, and we can make something of that.
Yeah, we've, I have to say, a couple of my volunteers have been, I guess even a little frustrated because, we put our group together to do this just to see whether there were going to be a lot of needs, and really they, fortunately for, many of them, they haven't had the need to go out, very often. And so sometimes they'll sit around and they'll be like, we wish we had a little bit more work to do. So now at least I've got a little bit of a place where maybe might be able to send them.
Sure.
In terms of helping with a larger group that might have more calls and those kinds of things. Because, we just, I don't like to say, we called our group at St. Peter's Circle of Friends, okay? Where we were basically just trying to, help match people up with whoever had needs and, people who had some time or some energy on their hands. But we haven't had tons of those kinds of things that have really, come screaming at us for some help. And so maybe, like I say, my head's going, maybe might be able to hook some of the people up in this group with you, because, some of them really would like to get out there and to do some work and some more volunteering, and this would be the opportunity for them to be able to do that. So, John, you said you've got how many volunteers out there?
Well, I've got a whole typewritten page of people that's, a lot of times you have to manage that closely.
Sure you do.
You don't ride a good horse to death, is the cliche. So you gotta kind of manage the volunteer labor base. There's probably, haven't counted them lately, but probably close to 30 people that work for us regularly. They're what I call skilled labor.
Right.
Anybody can do a yard cleanup job.
Right.
And
Just
you
gotta
can
have
bring,
a will be willing to
you
do
can
that,
bring
right.
a peace of mind and a blessing to an elderly person by just cleaning things up to where they can sit out on their porch and look, see how nice it looks.
Yeah.
No big piles of leaves. And that doesn't really take a whole lot of skill level. It just takes a little bit of manpower.
A little bit of manpower to do some of that.
Yep.
Well, I am grateful to you for helping to figure out how to manage all that. I think it's great, and I think that I know that there are lots of folks out in this community that are also grateful that you and the folks at Hearts and Hammers are doing exactly that. I said at the beginning of the show, it's one of those things that we got to learn how to look out for each other.
That's right.
And you know, so sometimes if you know there's an elderly person next door and you see that there are some things just starting to fall into disrepair, that might be worth a little bit of a phone call or a little bit of a you know, at least a knock on a door that says, you know, is there something here? You know, is there anybody else, you know, that can come in to help you to do some of these things? You know, would be a continued blessing for some folks. So again, my guest this morning, John Clayton, the Executive Director of Hearts and Hammers, and their job is assisting elderly homeowners with financial and physical restraints to help manage their homes. We're going to repair them. So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Stick around.
You don't realize how much weight you put on until it's gone. I'm Katie Dahl. I work in the emergency room at Mercy Joplin. I'm a nurse. I've been there for 8 years. I love my job. I think I have the best job in the world because I get to take care of people every single day. I had gastric bypass surgery almost a year ago. I have lost a total of 130 pounds. 30 pounds I lost before surgery with diet and exercise. It's not been easy. The surgery definitely has helped it come off easier, but I still have to, you know, watch what I eat, still have to exercise. I have a lot more energy. I can move around. My body doesn't ache anymore like it used to. I was pre-diabetic and now my blood sugars are all good and I'm not worried about being pre-diabetic anymore. I feel like I was when I was younger in high school and in my teenage years, just getting back to where I feel comfortable in my own skin now.
Well, again, thank you for giving up some of your Sunday morning and spending it here with us. Again, sometimes I'm absolutely amazed at the simplicity of a mission and the amazing things that some of the people here in our community do that. Hearts and Hammers is one of those organizations. In my conversation with John right before we were on the break here, he said, well, let's go ahead and give him the phone number just in case there's some elderly out there who might not have a computer or access. So the number is 417-621-629, thank you. 629-8135. So 417-629-8135. And again, it's Hearts and Hammers Joplin at gmail.com. At gmail.com, okay? So Hearts and Hammers Joplin at gmail.com. So again, if you know someone or have encountered someone who might need the services of Hearts and Hammers, please give us give them a ring or a call. God bless, and thanks for joining us again for Sunday morning.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.